The following transmission contains unencrypted instances of explicit language. Mature audiences are cleared to proceed.
Shall we begin? Let's begin.
It is extremely common for spy movies and television shows to play around on the very cutting edge of technology, usually taking at least a few steps beyond what is strictly possible. And yet, spy stories set in purely science fiction settings are quite rare. I'm Todd.
And I'm Dave, and we like to talk about spy movies, and sometimes spy television shows.
The complex political struggles of Star Trek's Deep Space Nine series are fertile ground for some juicy interstellar espionage stories, so it makes sense to include a spy character in the cast. We're going to talk about the tradecraft of Elim Garak in this episode of Spies Like Us. We have put some TV series on the list, but this one we're not exactly doing the TV series, we're doing a specific character from the TV series. And it's also going to be our first science fiction spy.
Oh, that's right.
Or not a lot.
We were talking about that. We were going to try and do a science fiction one, and this is our first one.
The subject is Elim Garak from the Deep Space Nine series of Star Trek. I think even hardcore Trek fans will find something to enjoy about this deep dive into one particular very interesting character.
The Spies Like Us podcast is really about tradecraft and spy characters. So we're going to take a different approach to Garak than you might be used to.
Deep Space Nine, of course, runs 7 seasons from 1993 to 1999. It is the first series where Rick Berman took over major control, and the show, it's the first Star Trek that isn't directly influenced by Gene Roddenberry. This show really does take advantage of the fact that maybe they could get out from under some of his particular constraints and have a series that makes heavy use of characters who have, more mixed and nuanced loyalties and not just to the Federation.
But yeah, you're right. There's definitely a different approach to the characters. I really, really enjoyed it. I liked how there were so many conflicting views that had to be resolved because they were stuck in one place or within one vicinity. The Alpha Quadrant or the neighboring Gamma Quadrant. There had to be a resolution between conflicting views. I don't know. I could talk about this all night, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about tradecraft.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Garak is indeed awesome. And was originally intended to be a one-off character. They only were bringing Andrew Robinson in to do just one episode, and they were so impressed with his performance that they decided to develop the character into a full member of the cast. He pretty much had a very kind of a unique opportunity actor-wise that he apparently really, really took to. There's so much interesting and kind of challenging to get your arms around this character because, well, he's always lying. He's almost always lying. Lying is one of his core values, in fact.
I think what both Todd and I really keyed in on is Garak's real talent is omission of information. I think the times that he's actually flat out lied, said something that was false is in times where it was necessary for him to do. But in general, I think he's actually telling the truth. He's just kind of crafting the truth for whatever audience he has. He's an unreliable witness mainly because of his use of deception.
There do seem to be some core just Cardassian values that are shared amongst all Cardassians by default. Their number one priority is loyalty to the state, and then they have a secondary loyalty to their parents.
Right, and I think it was season 7, episode 22, Wayun, the Vorta. He flat out just describes the nature of Cardassians. They respect authority and they value the rule of law and the security of order.
I think it also comes out in when Dukat at one point is describing his frustration with the Bajorans' refusal to submit to Cardassian authority. To Dukat's Cardassian mind, if the Bajorans would just play ball with the way the universe is supposed to work, everything would be fine and no one would actually have to get hurt.
Right. Very Nietzschean. Like, you should just recognize the strong and appreciate their strength and live under their strong values. Gul Dukat's ideas, to him, he was very generous and kind because he wasn't as torturous as Cardassia wanted. And in his mind, he protested and appealed to Cardassia to take a more kinder approach. But his kind approach was scaled to a different level than Cardassia, that in his mind, he was the kind and generous person and that the Bajorans were unappreciative.
I think that can be inferred too in the family relationship too, because that loyalty to parents seems to be like a very one-way trip in Cardassian values. It's the children that owe loyalty to the parents. The parents don't seem to actually owe any loyalty to their children, or at least we see that in a lot of Cardassian family interactions. Garak's father certainly is super happy to throw Garak under the bus and treat him like shit at every opportunity. But Garak never seems to really on a fundamental level criticize his father for that, because that's just how Cardassians do. And
yeah, it's kind of a lesson of survival of the fittest, especially with Garak and Tane's relationship.
Right. Your parents are smarter and stronger than you. So according to the way Cardassians think the universe should work, the kids should just do what their parents say. And Dukat is also like, he's got that situation with his daughter. He's really annoyed that she won't go along with what he wants. Although I think that's one of the places, I didn't see the episode. You might have seen it more recently. Isn't Dukat choosing his daughter over the state some kind of part of his disconnect?
In the when we finally get to Pale Moonlight, because that's one of the biggest highlight episodes we're going to talk about, the fake video transmission, Wayun is like, Dukat's an idiot. He chose his daughter over, taking over and gaining power and conquering and blah blah blah. Yeah, it's definitely. But I like that you pointed out Zial's kind of rebellion towards her father. It shows the dynamic between her Cardassian love for her father and respect for her father, but also the Bajoran belief in autonomy.
Yeah. No, it's nicely sketched out there, and I like to think that Dukat's, the reason you set these strong values up is so that when a character does break with those values, it's a big it's a big feel moment.
Yeah, right. Like, oh, like,
right.
Yeah, you're definitely right. Because all of the times while Zial was still alive, Dukat literally, she was his biggest priority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now, given all that, here's what I think I can confirm, like by evidence of what's seen of Garak's values. He's apparently broken free from the primary Cardassian loyalty to the state. He's him and the state are no longer on good terms, and he doesn't seem to be super eager to repair that breach, but he is still demonstrably loyal to his species, to his race.
He's definitely devoted to his people to some degree. But yeah, it's the current government. Even before the Dominion alliance with the Dominion, he still doesn't love Gul Dukat and power, and he's very loyal to his people and culture.
Right. And to the extent to which, when he learns that the Klingons plan to do a sneak attack against Cardassia, he feeds that information to his old enemy, Dukat. His desire to protect Cardassian people from getting hurt override his disagreements with the government to that extent. Like I said before, we still see that he definitely still retains the loyalty to parents. relationship with his father is extremely fraught. But like a puppy, it's like no matter how many times his dad kicks him, he's still going back to that well. It would not cross his mind to just write his father off and say like, okay, fine, we don't have a thing anymore.
Right.
Another of his, like survival was mentioned, as a value. When we're looking at Garak, we're trying to figure out what does he really care about. Well, like one way you could look at as you're watching the show. I mean, by the time you're finished with the show, you probably have formed a whole bunch of different opinions. But along the way, you're just getting fed these little drips of information, and you're always being reminded that at any point, Garak could be lying about what he actually cares about. But obviously, self-preservation could have been said to be like his sole motivation for almost everything he does. But that would kind of be true of everyone. But with all those caveats, there's possibly too that, and this might be a Cardassian thing as well. It definitely seems to be an Obsidian Order thing, that revenge / outliving your enemies seems to be something that Cardassians prize. So in addition to, I think you had a note here about some episode than Fight for a New Cardassia. He says, I have an even better reason, which is revenge. And in The Wire, too, we see that he's willing to suffer greatly. Like, we get the idea that even a life of, like, torment and no happiness or joy would be preferable to him than death and letting his enemies outlive him.
Right. And I think you had brought up that Taines made that a big point, was outliving his enemies.
Right. On his deathbed, that was his father's like main concern. Is this guy still alive? Is this guy still alive? What about these guys? He's going down his list. Every Cardassian seems to have a list, of people that they feel like need to be taken care of before they can consider their life complete. And I think Dukat is on Garak's list there. At some points, this might not be a value, but at some points when it's a little difficult to figure out why he's getting involved, when he doesn't necessarily need to be, there might be some indications that he might just be a little bit addicted to the game and just like to have his hand in.
Yeah. Or like I think he described it as having his like pinky on the pulse of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Just a little toe in the water. Which is also a good way to maintain your survival, so that things don't, if you stay completely uninvolved and disconnected from everything that's going on around you, your enemies might be able to sneak up on you better than if you're, kind of finding some reason to be in the room where the big decisions are being made.
Right.
There's a really interesting scene in The Die Is Cast. This is the one where he tortures Odo and then seems really, really upset about that. Actually, I think I was going to talk about that more later. But I'll just say for right now, there's a scene that demonstrates also he might have the motivation of not being the person he used to be. Because we get a lot of indications that Garak has been a very, very bad person for a very, very long time, done a lot of bad things. So just in general, not wanting to not be the person he used to be, and to some extent maybe just not wanting people to think of him as the old Garak. That could also be motivation for some of the stuff he does. And that's really what I got for confirmed values. And you have some thoughts, of course.
Number one, survival. There are times where I think he really does pour his heart out or is honest. And I think it was season 5, episode 26, Call to Arms, where he's leaving to jump on the Defiant. And just before that, he has a conversation with Zial. And, we all know Zial is like in love with him. And, he's told her before, she's like, well, why do you talk to me? He's like, you're a Cardassian. I'm a long way from home. But she's all worried about his life and what's going to happen to him. And he goes on this whole rant. And I think that is really, I think is number one, and there's many, many moments where survival for his life and his business and his kind of well-being. And this goes back to your point about outliving your enemies. But he tells her a whole story. I once knew a Cardassian, a dashing and handsome young man, with a promising career, but he got exiled and had nowhere to run. But did he give up? No, he stuck upon a brilliant plan, instead of fleeing or whatever. What he did was he put himself surrounded by hostile strangers, like the last place his enemies would expect, built a life, set up his tailor shop, And his last point to her is, the moral of the story, my dear, is to never underestimate my gift for survival. So I really think not only does he have a talent, but he has a motivation for survival. Then I think his next layer of motivation is his loyalty to family and friends or people he's a strong bond to. Number one, going through huge lengths to get to his father, even though it was a big mistake. Both times that he goes chasing after Tane. But one of the quick points I wanted to talk about is really his loyalty to Cardassia and Cardassians, not really the government and current government, but just the people. He makes a big point. It's a rich and ancient culture. Old Cardassia is dead, and then Kira is just then fight for a new Cardassia. He's like, I have an even better reason, revenge. So we were talking about revenge, outliving your enemies type of thing. His friendship with Zial, talking about that he's alone and a long way from home, helping Cisco to beat the Dominion. And I think this kind of has an overlapping layer with what I think he also has demonstrated in another motivation is kind of serving the right. He has a means to an end, which I think everybody sees in him, but I think he sees things like this is the right thing to do. And whether it also happens to serve his need for survival, his love for his friends and family, his love for Cardassia, I think there are some moments where he actually is trying to do the right thing. Like, for example, when he finds about the Bajoran bomb, he doesn't have to tell anybody about that, but he does, and he stops the bombing. Like you pointed out, it's really hard to kind of find these things out, mainly because of his poker face that he always keeps. He's always got that smirk, and he's always he's always omitting information. He's always controlling the conversation, no matter who he's talking to.
Which is coming right up as soon as we get into the briefing room.
And I think you're right that they wanted to leave that air of suspicion or ambiguity.
You ready to talk about some general tradecraft?
Absolutely.
Retinal scan complete. Validating security clearance. Clearance granted. You may now enter the briefing room.
So let's talk about some general notes on Garak's tradecraft before we get into a few specific episodes and instances. And I want to start out with his what I call his poker smirk. It's interesting that Garak himself, the character, is not a particularly great actor. I think that when we see him showing distress, it's authentic. I can't think of any time where he cynically abuses an appeal to pathos in order to advance an agenda.
We discussed this, and I kind of wasn't sure what you were talking about at first, but then you kind of really explained it to me. He doesn't put on a performance. He always uses logic and reason, and facts. He makes sure to put up the right fact, even if he uses specific words that might affect someone's pathos. he's never gonna like, put on this melodramatic performance.
He would never, like, in Miller's Crossing, he wouldn't be down on his knees saying, "Look into your heart, look into your heart," right? He would be
kind of like that's what Quark does all the time.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, but that's not Garak's style. Garak would be, if Garak was out there in the woods with Dude, he'd be standing there with that same fucking smirk on his face and calmly explaining to you exactly what you have to gain or lose from shooting him. And some of the stuff he would say would be true. Some of it could be lies.
And he's always got that smirk of just like, that smirk and that witty, quirky, one-liners. And yeah, I definitely agree with you.
I was starting to think of it as almost like his version of a poker face. And I was super happy to see that Andrew Robinson, the actor, confirmed that there's an origin of that smirk in his novel, that there's at some point early in Garak's career, someone like specifically teaches him that technique.
Oh, really?
To always hide his emotions.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
He's never pretending to be a better friend to you, like feely friends, warm-hearted. Come on, we're buddies, right?
But yeah, he never does play the loyalty card. He always either demonstrates it through actions or wants you to guess if he's loyal. In fact, he makes it a point to make you think that he's not being loyal.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that you have to make the decision yourself. And then he watches the feedback of that, I guess, input into his variable, into the situation that he's already kind of put a control into. I think this is what I like Garak so much about is that he always wants people to question his motives or his loyalties.
There's a interesting, well, I think a fascinating entity in a series of fantasy novels called the Shannara books. This is like a ghost that lives in a pond. It's called the Grim Pond. This ghost has been there since the beginning of time, and the ghost knows everything. And it also hates all life. There's two things you know when you go to the Grim Pond. Number one, it knows the answer to the question you're asking.
Right.
Number two, it will tell you whatever it thinks has the greatest chance of getting you killed. So you have to do these gymnastics, but you're so desperate that you're going to the Grim Pond. You know that you can't take the information at face value, but you also know that whatever information it gave you, if you are clever enough, you would be able to figure out what you needed to know without it getting you killed. And obviously, Garak doesn't have that quality of hating all living things. Far from it.
Right. Also
when you go to Garak, you're always kind of playing that same game. You're going to him because you have no choice.
Right.
He's not just going to entirely tell you the truth, but you know that he does know what you need to know. And so maybe if you can untangle his lies, you can get what you want and emerge unscathed.
Yeah. It might not just be what he knows, but what he can do, which I think you're setting us up for when we talk about Pale Moonlight.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But, I think that's a wonderful analogy of Garak. But one thing I did want to say is there was that moment with him and O'Brien where they're on the runabout and they're just chatting. And like, Garak is like, all of you have become very trusting of me. It's very uncomfortable.
Right.
And I think it's because he's earned it through his actions. Like, he always wants you to question his loyalty, question his motives, question his information. But I think he's built up enough of a rapport and enough of a relationship with the people of DS9.
It unravels slowly over time, over the arc of the series, because there's only so long he could be just cast as this one note. In his early episodes, there's nothing to prove that he isn't actually, in fact, still working for the Obsidian Order. Right. But, we get all the way into season 3 until he spills the beans on that. And it probably time by then. But yeah, it's much later. You just have to let the character have some room for growth. But, but I think they do it slowly and well. And of course, a lot of Garak's tradecraft occurs off screen, like the vast majority of it. I mean,
it made it really difficult for us to kind of, this is why I hard binged the show is to find little nuggets for us to kind of put together. And Todd did an enormous amount of research to do this. Cause I found from watching it, there was more tradecraft from the rest of the cast than from Garak. And he's like the super spy. But you always know his fingers are somewhere in the background based on his on-screen moments and the effects of his on-screen moments.
Mm-hmm. Hallelujah. So yeah, that's his general style. Let's hit some specifics, starting with his first appearance in episode 3 of the first season, Past Prologue. Like you mentioned. Oh, so now here, the first thing I noticed is that, the sisters, the Klingon sisters, they come to him with a proposal. Basically, they're going to hand over a Bajoran militant to him that he can then turn over to the Cardassians, which at this point, now remember, of course, we're just meeting Garak. At this point, and actually even now, I don't think it's clear whether he could have actually sold that militant to the Cardassians or whether he would have. We know that he doesn't, but the interesting thing there is, again, he's perfectly happy to let people think that he could.
Yeah. One thing he does play with his poker smirk is he wants people to believe that he can, or he does still have these big connections. He doesn't correct people when they believe that he's like highly connected. I mean, he still has his like pinky on the pulse or his toe in the pond or, whatever.
We do get evidence too, though, here that he does in fact have some Cardassian contacts, because otherwise that's supposedly how he knows that why the Cardassians are after this particular Bajoran. He tips the DS9 crew off to the militants' plan to acquire a massive bomb. He doesn't know that the guy was going to blow up the station. I mean, maybe he suspected that was a possibility, but maybe the first idea in his head could have been that this bomb is going to be used against Cardassians, which those are his people. He doesn't want them hurt.
But coming from the survival standpoint, he could be building repertoire. Coming from the right or wrong standpoint, he could see this as a big problem. And like you had pointed out, that he doesn't want to be the old Garak.
Now, of course, the reason we bring up all these possible motivations for him to report the bomb is because at this point in the series, we don't know who Garak is. And he could have all of these different motivations. Throughout the series, we slowly kind of winnow those down and rule some of them out. For instance, like when we first meet him, it's entirely possible that he's still an active member of the Obsidian Order. I mean, what evidence do you have that that's not the case when we first meet him? We'll learn that's not the case. We'll learn some other things. Overall, he grows as into a more sympathetic character, but they do like to kind of string out the mystery.
So that's where we first meet him. The next time when I think we get some more clue into his loyalties and values are when he shows up again in season 2, about 2/3 of the way through, Profit and Loss. This is the one where Quark Quark has a Cardassian girlfriend. And he has the opportunity here presented to him from some Cardassian agent, which, again, Cardassians maybe being untrustworthy. Who knows if Garak believes the offer is genuine or not. But the offer is you could become unexiled. You'd be welcome back home if you give up these Cardassian dissidents. But he doesn't do that. He betrays the High Council and explains that to Quark when questioned as being just his love for his people.
Well, that goes back to your point about his love for Cardassia, not necessarily the government.
And in that episode, we had a little bit of plus spy points where he shows up and pretends that he's ready to kill the people, and fulfill his agreement with the Cardassian High Council. But that's just a ruse to draw the other Cardassian out so that he can kill him. Plus spy points for Garak.
Yes, definitely.
Shortly thereafter, we have the episode The Wire, where the questions about Garak's past start to become like more deeply explored. And this is the one where we find out he's got a device in his head that it was supposed to make him resistant to torture, and he finds being on Deep Space Nine a certain kind of torture, so he modified it. And it's burnt out, and now he's like in some excruciating pain. The main thing here, is like through the course of the episode, he tells 3 different stories about his past to Bashir, none of which are true. But he did use his own name, Elim, as a character in the story.
That's the first time. That's the first time we find out his first name, right? Is it?
Yes, Bashir. Bashir meets with Tain, who is we know at this point is the ex-head of the Obsidian Order, and that Garak used to work for. We don't know that Tain is Garak's father yet, and that's where Bashir asks Tain about the things that Garak said, and Tain laughs at him and says, "Oh, dude, the guy Elim that he's telling you about in those stories, that's him." So it's a good story. It's a great episode, but it's minus spy points in my number 3 worst. Just if I'm looking for pure tradecraft, don't use your own name in your cover stories.
Well, I think this is him reaching out to Bashir, to establish, a relationship. I mean, not to bring this up again, but he tells Ziyal that he's alone and away from home. And, there's the cynical view of Bashir being his pet. There's also the view of him reaching out for a relationship. And DS9 has often been called Cheers in Space. And I think it's really a show about how a bunch of different people become a family. And I think Garak is not left out of that family. Even if he's an outsider the entire time, he's still in that family. And this might be his first attempt to reach out to Bashir, and he gives him his own name. But yes, still minus spy points since we're prying around the edges.
Obviously, there's story reasons that sometimes people, spies in our stories, do things that are actually against their better interests or represent bad tradecraft. But that's the fun of the show, is talking about those.
Yeah, absolutely.
We never, in an early episode in season 3, this is the one where Kira gets abducted, but oh my god, it's one of my favorite episodes. This is the one where she gets abducted by the Obsidian Order, surgically modified to look like a Cardassian, and then it's this whole double play where it's
oh yeah,
yeah, we're trying to figure out what information they're getting out of her, but it's actually one of their own Cardassians that they're using her to try to unveil, which, by the way, that's huge plus spy points.
Yeah, they create this whole backstory for her that she really was Cardassian the whole time. That was a really good episode.
But I want to give minus spy points for the fact that now he does get strong-armed by Sisko into helping rescue her.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't explain why he tipped off Bashir to the fact that he knew. All they know on the station early in the episode is that she's disappeared. And he just proactively, out of nowhere, volunteers the information to Bashir that Kira is being held by the Obsidian Order, which doesn't satisfy any of his needs, motives, or ambitions, except just pure generosity of spirit.
Right.
You know, if we knew more about the story of why Garak actually got exiled, that would have told us a whole lot more about his character, I think.
Absolutely.
Mean, his character in a small c, like his soul.
Yeah.
But they made this conscious decision that they never wanted that to be entirely explained, which is probably key. You know, that's an essential ingredient to keeping, maintaining the mystery around the character. But
absolutely.
By the time we meet him up in this is a Super Garak episode in Improbable Cause. It's actually a two-parter, season 3, episode 20. He's at this point he's telling yet another story of why he's been exiled. At this point, I think they're winking at us a little bit when at this point his explanation is just tax evasion, that he hadn't that he just hadn't paid his taxes.
Yeah, he can't show his cards, Yeah, I just avoided the tax collector.
Right.
That's hilarious.
And he sticks to his story, which is so lovable about him, but also part of his technique is that he will doggedly stick to his story, lie directly to your face, even though he knows that he wasn't exiled for tax evasion.
Right.
So he's kind of fucking with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's just part of his brand, because he wants you to constantly question what that real reason is.
This is one of those points that like he it's uncommon for him to flat out lie. This would be one of them, because he doesn't want you to know why he was exiled. Whether it's like you had pointed out, he wants to be a new Garak, or whether it's him maintaining that poker smirk or whatever. This is one of those moments where he full blast like just makes up a story.
He spots what happens is he spots an assassin on the station. Somehow deduces that assassin is gunning for him. And decides, now this is all stuff we find out later in the episode, but what happens in real time is he blows up his own shop because he wants to basically preempt the assassin by faking an assassination attempt on his own life, which is kind of plus spy points. I mean, it works on the level of, I mean, what he really wants to do here, he wants to get Odo extremely involved in the investigation.
Right.
And
he needs something real, because Odo is a very like by the statute type of guy, and he's not going to get involved unless there's a real threat, and now a real threat has occurred.
Right. And also, I don't think at this point Garak thinks like Odo has any love for him, and also that Odo's extremely distrustful of him. And if he just goes to Odo with this story of, I think someone's here to kill me, maybe it's better if instead there's a big explosion, which obviously that's something Odo cannot ignore, because even if he doesn't care if Garak got killed, it's a fucking explosion on the station. You have to investigate that.
Right.
And obviously it's much better for Garak to have someone investigate an attempt on your life than to investigate the fact of your murder.
Right. Because it's kind of like the, idea of law enforcement, or not the idea of law enforcement, but, a lot of times crimes are already committed and you have to like retroactively figure them out. Versus Garak needs something more preemptive because his life really is on the line. But the law isn't going to recognize something preemptive. They're only going to recognize oh shit, a building blew up. Let's investigate this.
Right. And we're soon gonna find out too that that on the same day 5 other Cardassian operatives were killed or met untimely accidents or suddenly died of natural causes. But it's
Right. The brakes didn't work. They drowned in the shower. They overdosed.
Garak really insists on following the assassin, the suspected assassin, with Odo, which seems to me to be a breach of his cover. But that's fine, because pretty soon, once Odo confirms with his own Cardassian contact about the other 5 agents' deaths, Garak pretty much just spills his beans and says, like, yeah, those 5 guys and me were like the top of the Obsidian Order underneath a guy named Tane. This is my minus spy points, my number 2 worst tradecraft. At this point, I get it. We're into season 3. We're actually like near the end of season 3. It's probably about time we drop this whole pretense of Garak maintaining that he has no affiliation with the Obsidian Order whatsoever. But also, it just seems to be also just plot driven and not an actual like necessary spy move for him to make. Him giving up this information to Odo is huge, and it doesn't serve any purpose except to kind of move the plot forward and kind of for us to get past this whole, is he or isn't he an ex-member of the Obsidian Order? Which also brings to me, like, okay, so then there's my minus 5 points for Cisco. For later in this, I mean, Odo's going to tell Cisco, okay, he said, hey, that guy we always thought might have been previously a member of the Obsidian Order? Well, he admitted it to me. Well, now, if you hadn't even already, probably now is the time to involve Section 31 and start doing some background checks, some digging or whatever. Because previously it was like kind of a question. Maybe there were some, I don't know, some namby-pamby liberal Federation regulations against investigating someone without, evidence. But now you have the evidence. And,
right.
But for the rest of the series, we still just like go around saying like, oh yeah, hey, there's that ex-member of the Obsidian Order just walking around the promenade. Let's not investigate that.
Yeah. I mean, I would presume 31 already knew. It's kind of like, what we've seen in all the other movies we've watched where there's like a relationship between enemy intelligence agencies.
Oh, right.
So they probably have been watching him and he's not really doing anything other than being a tailor.
And of course, like, especially in Discovery, like Section 31 turns out to be like as uncooperative as you could possibly imagine with the rest of the Federation. They really keep their cards close to their chest. So,
oh really?
Yeah. Even if
I still haven't even watched Discovery,
even if
you've been telling me about it, I got to check it out.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I recommend anybody check it out. So I'm not actually going to give it plus 5 points for blowing up your own shop. I'm not going to give it minus, but I'm not going to give it plus. I think a better spy could have figured out a way to get Odo involved without being this dramatic about it.
It's not just blowing up the shop. It goes back to tracing to who's involved. And like we talked in our Bourne episode that like, how Bourne created a blip on the globe, by just like showing his passport at an airport.
I see where you're going with this too, because by, now the assassin is scared off and the assassin's going to scurry off back. And that's a trail that you follow back to the course.
So this has like a 2-prong effect. One, he gets the law involved and he knows Odo at this point. He knows Odo is a matter of fact by the statute. I will throw the book at your face. I don't even give a fuck. Like, I'm going to put on this pretense that I have no feelings, because I have to like keep up my image of being about the law. So he knows Odo's not going to go in on any kind of like speculation. He's only going to go in if something happens. So that's where you're kind of like you're a little questioning like whether or not he should have blown up his building. But what you had pointed out was that creating that situation helped him track the trail of the assassinations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's where my number 3 best comes in, is that he used this, he created the situation where his building was blown up and creating a fake assassination, not only one to bring in the law to protect him on his safe spot, because his only safe place in the entire universe, right, is Deep Space Nine. He can't go back to Cardassia, can't go to Bajor, can't go to the Earth or any Federation territories, no Romulan territory. Nobody likes Cardassians, right? He can't go back home, right? His only place to exist right now is being a tailor on Deep Space Nine. So this comes into our survival point as far as like one of his motivations. And being a good spy, using tradecraft, creating this like, a fake assassination lets him get a lot of things done with one. He killed 2 birds with one stone, multiple birds with one stone.
I buy it. When Odo comes back with this information and Garak sees the 5 guys on the list, I think he might immediately suspect his old spy master Tain, because, and we're gonna meet him again real soon. Tain's his line is, "Remember what I always taught you: always burn your bridges. You never know who's coming up after you," which is another one of those like peppered throughout the entire series, all these ways that Cardassians will take a human metaphor or a human fable and draw the exact opposite conclusion that a human would, which is one of the things that makes them so delightful. I love it when I love Star Trek.
You were talking about The Boy Who Cried Wolf.
That's, I think is right. That's the classic one, Bashir tells him that story, and he's like, "Well, the moral of that story is obviously you should never tell the same lie twice." Like, duh.
Right. Yeah. No, but
which Garak never does. Garak never does tell the same lie twice.
No, he never does ever. He definitely has his skills and is definitely sharpened with them.
So I think that knowing his old master as well as he does, I think he might immediately suspect Tain, because he knows that would be Tain's style if Tain was making some kind of huge play, which he'll be correct about. Tain is making a huge play. That one of Tain's first orders of business would be, again, to burn his bridges behind him. Plus spy points for me, and my number 2 best tradecraft that I'm going to call out for this show. He would know that if it was Tain, that Tain will not rest until Garak is actually dead. Once you're on the list of a particular Cardassian, you're on that list until you or that Cardassian are in the grave. One or the other. There's nobody ever gets off a Cardassian's list.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
There's no point at which Garak and Dukat just fucking hug it out.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right that this is how Garak comes to that conclusion, but I think this is Tain actually being a father. And as much as Garak wants the verbal confirmation, Tain's relationship in him, and it goes back to you saying that like the child always just accepts the parent. I think Tain is really, really, teaching him as he's getting older. He's learning new things. Garak's getting older. He's learning new things.
Well, Tain never made anything easy on his son. In fact, he was overly. I mean, he left him with crippling claustrophobia, from locking
Disorder.
him in a disorder from locking him in a closet all the time when he was a kid, and never giving him any positive feedback at all. But just to close this out, the reason it's my number 2 best is that it's the correct play to go toward Tane to go into the dragon's den, because if it was Tane's not going to rest until Garak's dead. So you got to tackle it, Same thing. That's why I kind of had the Jason Bourne thing in my notes. Is they've made an attempt on your life. You don't just like go into hiding. You were in hiding. That didn't work out.
Yeah, this is his supremacy moment.
Yeah, it's time to go at them. And I was thinking, you know what? If it wasn't Tane, of course it was. But if it wasn't, then it would also be the correct play to immediately get in touch with Tane to let him know about the 6 assassination attempts, 5 of which were successful. Because that could also indicate that Tane is in trouble. Either way, it's the right play for Garak. They go ahead and they meet up because when they are, chasing the assassin or something, it does indeed lead them to Tane. But of course, Tane's got a bunch of Romulan friends, and so they capture Garak and Odo. I also think this is like a plot reason for Garak to have gone ahead and told Odo I really was part of the Obsidian Order. We really don't almost ever get to see Garak operating alone. Anything sneaky that Garak is doing is going to be like totally off screen. So Odo had to be along for this ride. So Odo, which is a person that we, the audience, trust, could see the interaction between Tane and Garak.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that's where, in that scene of Tane and Garak's reunion, it's really like we're really kind of watching that scene through the eyes of Odo in a certain way, because these two guys, they clearly know each other a lot. They're trading some banter and some stuff, but we're supposed to be allowed to like kind of observe and participate in that. And we get some plus spy points for Tane noting, like Garak says like something about your pointy-eared friends. And, Tane just explains that to Odo. He says like, look at this guy work. Look at this guy work.
Right.
He knows like either I'm going to defend them, which will tell him something about like where my actual loyalties lie, or I'm going to just let it slide, which is going to sow dissent between me and my potential allies. I want to say too, this is, I think, the first time that we see Garak break through that psychic defense that he has in all his interactions, where Tane refers to Garak as having betrayed him, and Garak seems anguished and extremely passionate. He says, I never betrayed you.
Yeah, these are those moments where he just kind of like lets off. So you could tell he is a person.
I don't think he's actually capable of that psychological, emotional manipulation. If he exhibits anguish over that thought, I believe it.
Yeah.
I think that's always the time you're getting that peek. That you're getting that peek behind the armor.
Right.
Tane says, well, you have 2 opportunities here. You could walk away and I'll let bygones be bygones, which is probably not true. And Garak probably knows that. Or he can join Tane on the mission and all will be forgiven. And Odo reminds Garak of all the things that Tane did to him, the exile, the fact he just tried to kill you. But Garak, for raisins, says, I don't care about that. Hey, Mr. Tane, I'm back. And I think that's might be where we smash to the credits, because it's supposed to be like a cliffhanger on a 2-episode dealio. And we're going to go ahead and make that the cliffhanger of our podcast as well. Next week, we'll handle the resolution of this 2-part episode, and we have several more Garak-centered episodes to discuss, including the truly fantastic In the Pale Moonlight.
As always, the best way to make sure you don't miss out on that is to hit the subscribe button on iTunes, Google, your favorite podcast app. Also, you can find updates on our Facebook page or website, spieslikeus.net. And please, if you can help us out, give us some feedback by rating us and leaving comments. We always are trying to improve the show, and your thoughts would be a big help.
The preceding transmission sampled the songs Ice Cold by Audionautics, Enter the Party by Kevin MacLeod, and sound effects from freesound.org. Attributions and links are found at spieslikeus.net. Editing by Todd Hostetler.